Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please feel free to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. Thank you for listening, and now on to this week's episode. Hey, Artificial Podcasters, welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and this week I am extremely excited to welcome Levi Sawyers and Shaun Withers from Jargon to the Artificial Podcast. And I had the pleasure of getting to meet Levi in person, actually, at the Project Voice conference this past January, and we had a really good conversation just about voice technology and some of the work that he's been up to at Jargon. And from that conversation, I was able to actually meet Shaun as well and got connected with them a bit deeper, and we actually tried out what Jargon is currently working on. And let me just say, for content management, this is a really cool thing that they've built. I'm really excited to be able to talk with them both about it. But before the three of us get into our conversation, let me tell you a bit about Levi and Shaun. Levi is the head of customer success at Jargon, managing Jargon's customer success strategy and marketing efforts. He oversees the customer onboarding process, customer support, and content creation to help customers get the most out of voice tools. Prior to Jargon, Levi held positions in software incubation and program management. Shaun Withers is head of partnerships at Jargon and manages go-to-market strategy and business development efforts. He oversees relationships with industry partners, digital agencies, and brands. Prior to Jargon, Shaun has held positions in M&A investment banking and in investment management. Levi, Shaun, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you both?
Doing great. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the three of us have been talking for a couple of weeks now because of some of the collaboration that we've been doing with Jargon, but I'm really excited to kind of dive into what you both are working on, and specifically your thoughts on content and content management when it comes to voice technology specifically, which is definitely something that I don't think is talked about enough. So I'm really looking forward to this chat I'm going to have with both of you.
Yeah, awesome.
So let's kick things off here, of course, and learn a bit more about you both. So what led you both to get started in the voice assistant tech space based on your current backgrounds? And I guess specifically, what led you both to Jargon? However you both want to kick that off.
Yeah, I can go ahead and kick that off because I think it naturally leads to Shaun. So for me, I had actually just taken a break from my previous job and was exploring new opportunities. I knew I wanted a little bit of an adventure and came across Milcana had reached out to me, and we got coffee and we were talking about what next steps would look like. And actually at that time we had the project that she was working on was not associated too much specifically with virtual assistants and voice, but it was within hospitality, and that's where really my background was with technology. And so having conversations with her, they had actually just recently got accepted into the Alexa Accelerator powered by Techstars in Seattle. I was in Seattle, Milcana was in Seattle, Jonathan, our CTO, was also in Seattle, and it kind of became a perfect mix to hop into that program and really see what we could come out of the program with. And with that first entering, we pivoted from our current project that we were working on into really what Jargon has become today.
Yeah.
And so for me, I mean, more or less, you could say it was by accident, but the path was there. And actually, with the start of that program, that's when Shaun kind of stepped in. You want to take it, Shaun?
Yeah. So I joined a few months after Levi, and at the time I was working in investment banking, and particularly technology investment banking, focused on mergers and acquisitions, and I was ready for a bit of a change. I was seeing all the cool products that my clients were building, and I wanted to get into a new exciting space. So voice was particularly exciting for me, and it's definitely something that is new and has a lot of potential. And so I was speaking with Milcana, and we were at the same co-working space together, and so we kicked off conversations, and we just stayed in touch over several months. And then as soon as I heard that they had pivoted into voice, that was actually when I started to get particularly interested, and I came and joined the team kind of on a part-time basis for a while, and it was fun to go through the accelerator with them, and then decided to make it full-time and make the hop over.
Yeah, no, I really like your stories, because I think it is a testament to how you're set on one path, and then an opportunity presents itself that switches that completely, and then you just run with it and are able to work on some incredible stuff. So that's really neat how you both actually just kind of wound up, I guess, in voice and specifically working for Jargon. So another question for the both of you, given, of course, that you work day in and day out in voice technology, what is one thing that fascinates you both the most about voice assistant technology and its capabilities?
Yeah, I'll take that. So for me, I'm a huge audio person. I spend a lot of my waking hours listening to music and listening to podcasts. And so for me, thinking about how audio can be kind of reimagined for voice, particularly engaging experiences that you can have through storytelling, for example, or even the AirPods and the sensors that are in the AirPods that we can use now to create these really rich experiences, and kind of pushing it to the next level of audio AR. That's super exciting for me.
Yeah, the audio AR, though, you just saying that gets me excited, because I agree 100% that, we look at the market of hearables, quote unquote hearables, that are starting to emerge now, and the AirPods really kick that off. So I really like that that's something that fascinates you, because I think there's huge opportunity there. Levi, is there anything that you really find fascinating about voice assistant tech?
Yeah. First off, what Shaun just mentioned, we've had so many conversations
Yeah.
involving that. So I echo a lot of his same thoughts, but I'll add to that outside of kind of the voice AR space is really just the technology itself and how it's an enabler, specifically to individuals that might not have the channel to gain mass information.
Yeah.
I think that's truly exciting.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. It definitely, when you look at the technology itself, it democratizes so many different facets of just information in general. And, one thing that I've been thinking of, especially, as we're recording this, we're in the midst of this pandemic. I'm like, wouldn't it be something with all of the misinformation that seems to be floating around on social and even through the media, if maybe if the WHO just had an Alexa skill or a dedicated Google action that just channeled information, and it was just funneling it through these platforms that literally are in multiple locations throughout somebody's home. And at that point, the information is coming from a very credible source. There's no filtering to be had. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a game changer for just information and content delivery. And that's definitely something I think we're going to talk about here as well. But maybe if maybe either one of you can figure out who can share this best, but if you want to share the story, I'm really interested to hear the story behind Jargon, and specifically what problems you're trying to help VUI designers, developers solve, along with what you're trying to achieve overall. I don't know who wants to field that one.
How about I'll take it first, and Levi can add some color to it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so the story really is that we got really excited about this space, and in particular, we saw that thinking about applications from an AI perspective and from a voice perspective first, really, causes teams to have to reimagine their entire experience that they build. And so this presents a massive opportunity for a company like us to get into this space and see how we can help. And really what we focused on is we saw that what really needs to shift is the content. And there are a ton of unique content specific problems in voice. When you compare it to web and mobile, so the shift from web to mobile was a painful shift and caused a lot of people to have to reimagine the experience that they're creating. But it was the same medium for the most part, just on a smaller screen, right? So that shift, while it was painful and caused a lot of people to rethink about the business and where in particular the mobile phone is going to have a place within their experience, they didn't have to reimagine the content, the actual the way that it's delivered to the user, because it's the same medium. So with voice, there's all types of peculiarities and content specific mechanisms, with utterances and with slots and providing variety and all of these things that really you need to have a system that maintains, is built for the medium specifically so that you can handle these different peculiarities, and also allows your team to really push the boundaries of the quality of the content that they're creating. So, we've been viewing this whole space from the lens of what does the content look like and how does it change, and we discovered pretty quickly that you really need to have a purpose-built tool for this medium.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, having now had the opportunity to kind of play around and demo the platform myself, I think, when we were in one of the feedback sessions, I think I mentioned, for me, because of the way that I think and I structure things in my head, it just helped organize everything so much better. Because even though I'm a more visual person, I like condensing that visual down into structured layers. And that's exactly what Jargon allowed us to do in the sample that we were building for it. So I think that problem that you guys are solving here, especially when we look at something like content structure for voice, where it's so much different than anything else, I think you guys are really onto something and are on the ball with what you've built. So I really like that. That's really the core problem that you're trying to solve with this. So, Shaun, what are some of the biggest issues that you've come across when it comes to designing and managing content for voice? I know you've spoken with so many different agencies and so many different professionals. What are some of the trends that you've seen that people have given you feedback on when it comes to content management for voice, and what some of the core issues are?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have spoken with many different, we particularly speak with digital agencies that are building applications on behalf of brands, and we speak directly with the brands that are in the space and have a team dedicated to building voice applications. And really what I've come across is that teams don't really think about it as, oh, we need a CMS, right? But they are having content management problems. And so what they've come across is maybe they don't label it as a CMS that they need, but they've come to realize that, first of all, having content hard-coded in the application is a really challenging place to start.
Yeah.
So extracting that content out into a system, whatever that system is, whereby you can manage your content separately. And so what we've found is a lot of folks have used spreadsheets. So Google Sheets or Airtable. And as you can imagine, you run into a lot of challenges. It works for extracting the content, having a single place where you can go in and make changes. And it solves a little bit of the collaboration problem where you can pass that spreadsheet to another team member. But as soon as the complexity builds and the application grows, maintaining version control among the different team members is challenging. You know, it's very error prone. Any single change of content that can break the
Right.
application. You know, there's all types of problems that arise with using spreadsheets.
Yeah, and I definitely have met a couple of folks as well in the space who use spreadsheets and use some archaic ways of doing this. And I'll even admit, when we first started, and I even still do this to some extent, whiteboard everything out, and then even sometimes transfer to just Word documents and different things. Now, of course, we've migrated beyond that a bit at this point, but I agree with you that, you know, on the front, because for so long there hasn't really been a dedicated way to manage content of voice and the way it needs to be structured. You know, spreadsheets for a lot of people made the most sense, but that's again why I draw back upon having played around with jargon. It fixes that issue entirely. So I'm actually not shocked from a lot of the people I've talked with either that that's kind of the sentiment that you've been getting when it comes to some of the core issues that people are dealing with for content. So Levi, what are some key tips and strategies that you can share when it comes to developing and organizing content for voice apps? I know this is something you and I have talked about in the past.
Yeah, and it's something that you know, Shaun and I had a conversation with last week, and just, you know, what are kind of just general concepts that we want to make sure are out there, even from the start of someone thinking about a voice strategy to individuals starting to work on content and anything in between. The first one that I would say that we've ran across, just, you know, working with so many different agencies, is and as well as just individuals out there, is to separate your content from the voice app logic. That really just helps prepare you for everything else that you want to do in
Mm-hmm.
terms of content. And it's something that, you know, it's very easy just when you're first getting started building voice apps, that it's right there. But doing that small step really just accelerates where you could be, you know, tomorrow and the next week, and as you continue development. The second would be to really start planning for the future. So building on to, you know, thinking about beyond next week, but planning for the future of the voice app and making sure that the content that you're organizing is easy to hand off from person to person, especially team to team. So enabling a little bit more of that
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. You can almost say that this is like an evolution of your content creation, right?
Yeah.
And you know, another one would be number 3, think of responses and bundles, and taking a full advantage of a multi-model experience. So specifically within that, making sure that, you know, you're considering the modality of the user's situation in that moment, taking and leveraging the existing technologies that we already use today, not thinking of voice versus voice only, but
Right.
truly in the capacity of, hey, you have other tools to be able to relay the information, take advantage of that.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, especially if you're looking at building something, you know, that's voice, we'll say quote unquote voice first. I think people kind of get tricked up in that because I think, oh, it just has to be a voice only medium. Well, no. And that, you know, we have Echo Show, we have smartphones that are starting to become a bigger part of this picture. And then you have the Google Nest Hub, you have even TVs and Amazon presentation language and some of this different stuff. So I think you made some really good points there about looking at that from a bundled type perspective, because it translates so much easier when you're looking at designing something for multimodal versus
100%.
versus something that's strictly just, you know, a voice only application, if you will.
So number 4 on the list, Nick, is just to keep content fresh. And that's updating content, not having stale content, but also adding just variations of the content that you already have. So different ways of saying good morning, you know, hey, how are you? Anything along those lines. So being able to randomly have those greet a user are definitely huge for, you know, a success of a voice app. And then the last one that I wanted to be able to throw out there is really what we talked about at Project Voice, And what we saw all around us is just taking advantage of the tools in the ecosystem. There's a lot of great companies out there, such as Jovo, that is providing a platform for voice developers out there. There's Botmock, VoiceLow, Spoken, Pulse Labs, all these companies that have tools to really streamline the experience for anyone developing for voice and get the most out of the platform.
Yeah, I think every single one of those are excellent tips. And I was just talking a bit about multimodal there, but I want to switch gears to the last tip you mentioned, where you're talking about the variety of different resources that are currently out there. And I think that's one of the exciting parts of being in the voice assistant tech space right now is there are so many different groups of people trying to make this easier so more people can actually come into it and we can start innovating a bit more. And I think Jargon is no exception to that, because what you guys have done here with consolidating that content development process, which is tedious to say the least when it comes to designing a voice app, you've got that locked in. And that goes into, I think, the next thing I wanted to chat with you about a bit here is, what are some examples of maybe voice apps that you can talk about, or different things that you've seen people who've used Jargon so far, maybe even in some of your betas? What are some of the things they've built, and what is some of the feedback that you've gotten from them after they've built something with the platform?
Yeah. So one of the things that really stand out to me when individuals first hop into Jargon and they start using it is, one, how they're able to actually visually represent how response bundles are mapped out, and be able to see that in a much clearer way to take advantage of the way voice is laid out. So from having that speech component to the reprompt to the visual aid, switching between those and understanding they're all part of the same response, I think really helps individuals. And we start seeing that actually get mapped out more and more as individuals are building out those responses, actually putting in those reprompts to remind the user, and also adding the variation that I had talked about previously. So instead of the same way, every single time a user hops in hearing the same exact thing, actually adding those variants to diversify, the user isn't feeling like they're just getting the same mimicked representation of the voice app.
Oh yeah, and I know one thing that really stood out to our CTO at Red Fox AI, my friend Brett, is he was talking about how you had to, before, when he would code stuff individually, tagging the SSML of each thing you wanted to adjust for Alexa's voice. Well, I remember him saying that when we were messing around with the Jargon, the process of tagging different pieces of content for SSML was like 10 times easier. And I remember seeing that as well. And it's just simplifying, things like that for people that I think are going to go very far in the grand scope of designing for voice and voice apps. And that's something I think you guys have really keyed on with the platform. So,
yeah.
Shaun, maybe you
touched on one piece there. Yeah, I think you touched on one piece there, which is SSML. And that's actually, when we've looked at and worked with a lot of agencies, it's used, but I don't think not to the scope of how powerful SSML is actually. And
absolutely.
Working with the tone of the application to the way that, you would pronounce a specific name, that's where more commonly we see it, but it is a pretty powerful tool when it comes to voice experiences.
Yeah, and I just wanted to hit on one point that you had said earlier, Nick, which is, the tools in the ecosystem are really making it much easier to build these applications, and that's 100% true. And we definitely are focusing on trying to make it easier as well. But the distinction that I'll make is that we're not trying to focus on allowing your team to quickly get a voice app out into the market. I think that there's plenty of tools that will help you kind of, in a day, kind of mock something up and push it straight to the platforms, which is great. And those tools have gotten us to where we are in the ecosystem, and they're fantastic tools. What we really are focused on is power tools for designers and developers. And really focusing on the use case of the enterprise where they probably have a budget to dedicate to this, and the product is critical within their business,
Yeah.
or they're determining a path of how it can become critical in their business. And really for them, the use case is beyond just a proof of concept mock-up. And really they're thinking through, okay, how do we deliver this at scale? And how do we think about a system that we can adopt so that we can have marketing sign off on the content and legal sign off on the content? And if you're at a digital agency, how do we hand something over to the client after we've built this, so that they can adopt it and own it and maintain it over time? So we are focusing on making the whole process easier, but we're not focusing on these very simple skills and actions getting out into the market, because I think we can all agree that we don't need more of those, right?
Yeah, and no, I really like what you just said there, and I really like that. At least I got out of using Jargon was it is very design focused. It's meant for you to create something robust that isn't just, for lack of a better word, something that's crappy just for the sake of getting it out there. This is really a platform that you guys have made to extend the development arm and extend the design arm to be able to really create solid content. And that's, I think you're spot on with that. So maybe this is something you both can feel. With voice assistant tech and voice apps constantly evolving, what are some ways that you think VUI designers and voice app developers, what are some ways that they can future-proof their content structure?
Yeah, I'll take a stab and then pass it to Levi. I think thinking through how much of your content is reusable, and then being able to structure that so that you can take advantage of that reusable content. So we have a few concepts that we have introduced. So this concept of a snippet, which is essentially a piece of content that can be reused and referenced throughout the application. So think about a name. Maybe it's a recipe name and Alexa pronounces the recipe wrong every single time. And so you don't want to have to go through and mark up SSML every time that recipe is named, but you just want to do that once. So you can save that snippet essentially, and then reference it throughout the application. And that extends beyond just names or entities, but it can be reusable phrases. So oftentimes you have a lot of your prompts are fairly similar. And so being able to section off some of those prompts and have them be reusable pieces of content that you can pull in and dynamically assemble into the application.
Yeah, and I think we're only going to see, as we move forward here, some of these intricacies of content development and organizing that content, maybe even how that's structured within Alexa and Google Assistant themselves change. So I think the more agile that designers can be and the more agile that developers can be, deploying some tools like Jargon to future-proof their content structure are going to be truthfully essential as we can develop more and more robust experiences here, which I really hope does start happening, where people really just start getting down into the nitty-gritty of voice apps and creating stuff that actually solves problems for folks as well. So what are your thoughts then, again, for both of you? What are your thoughts on the future of voice assistant technology overall? Do you think that it'll just remain siloed to just Alexa, Google Assistant, and Bixby, or do you see that evolving to maybe there's some other voice assistants that come into play here as well? And maybe this, voice becomes part of the web versus just kind of siloed to different devices, if you see where I'm going with this question.
I definitely see where you're going with this question. I love this topic because there's so much opportunity out there. I don't see them just sticking to Alexa and Google. I think Brett Consall has done a good job of talking about how the growth of other various assistants are growing, proprietary assistants within brands. And I want to point out, in terms of the future and what I get excited about with this technology is not just it siloed, of course, in voice, but it having a marriage with the other technologies out there and really creating that relationship. So, I had a crazy example the other day where I hopped in my car and Siri popped up with a suggestion to go to the coffee stand. And I realized at that point, I have, that is strictly out of habit. At that time, I go and get my coffee at the coffee stand, and I drive back
I was
home.
gonna say,
And for it to just prompt like that was, one, humans are creatures of habit, and it caught me. That's my habit. But two, if the technology is that good, and yes, that's where I was going. Imagine that, having that same technology with voice, and then working together to be like, hey, because you're going there, like, would you like to go ahead and just give your order now?
Right.
And have that kind of prompt. So,
The
in the
predictive
future,
part of it.
oh, definitely. So if there's something that brings it all together like that, and voice is, part of that enablement, because it is just that much quicker than looking at a screen or touching a screen, or, anything along those lines. So that gets me excited.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Shaun, did you have anything to toss in there?
Yeah, I think I totally echo what Levi's saying, and I think that this is our time to start thinking more heavily about what the user is doing and what the situation is, and tailoring the experience to that situation. So sometimes it doesn't even make sense to have a voice response. Sometimes it makes sense only to have a screen response. So thinking beyond just the voice only interactions. And there's a lot of great designers that are focusing on this space, and hopefully we're going to see some really great applications that focus on those specific use cases that are primarily tailored, where voice can actually be helpful because of maybe your hands are busy, and your eyes are busy. So thinking about those specific scenarios, I'm really excited about some of the more enterprise use cases around maybe around factory lines, or delivery people, or field workers, or medical staff. There's so many physical processes, and not at the moment, but as soon as this COVID-19 thing comes to an end, there's so much in-person physical workflow things that voice interface can add so much value, because it allows them to continue the flow of what they're doing, and record data while they're doing it. So and service information back to them. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of those use cases come in the future.
Yeah, I think you both are spot on with what you're saying. And one thing I'm excited in the post-pandemic era, we'll call it, is I think more people, because they are now confined to their homes in areas where over the past couple of years, people have been buying Echoes and Google Nest products en masse. I think people are almost kind of just behavior shifting to using these more often. And I am even seeing on social media people starting to finally discover that these things can do more than just play music and give you the weather. And that's that's an uphill battle that I've been fighting since being in this, and I'm sure you guys have as well. But I think we're going to see a behavior shift out of this pandemic to where people are really going to embrace this more, to do a variety of different things. And that's something I think we all can only hope for, to really start making some progress here. And I think Amazon and Samsung and Google have done an excellent job getting their devices into people's hands on the consumer side. But I don't know, I feel like waiting in the wings, there's just probably a voice assistant out there that is going to change the game. And it may not even be a voice assistant. Maybe it's just a piece of voice technology that can embed itself in some crazy other areas of tech, like you mentioned, Levi, where we have this combination of IoT and voice and AI, and it's just this super thing that just we can't absolutely live our lives without it. I think that's on the horizon. So I really like where you both are going with their thinking there. So then, as we kind of wrap things up here from our conversation, I always like to leave on this question, and you both can either answer this individually or just kind of go back and forth. But what is one thing that you think someone can do today to begin leveraging voice assistant technology, either personally or within their organization?
Yeah, that's a good one. I really lean on thinking through, does this application or this idea that you have really make sense for a voice application? And thinking through, like, what is it about a voice first interface that would make it better, either faster, more efficient, or, you know, utilizes a piece of time which was unavailable without a voice experience. And thinking through what is the best scenario for both the input and the output, and thinking about those separately, right? Just because the voice application is triggered by the user with their voice doesn't mean that they have to have a voice only response.
Right.
Oftentimes it's better to display information on a screen. So kind of decoupling those two, I'd say is the number one thing to think about. And so how do you structure your content with that in mind?
Fantastic. Levi, you have any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo along the same lines and say that just thinking about what, you know, from a brand perspective, what your consumers want and what kind of information they want to get quick and as easy as possible. I would say, you know, thinking of voices, as Shaun said, not the only channel, but an extra channel to be able to convey that information to your consumers is definitely important. And it's an easy way to get started in voice now.
Yes, definitely something I think a lot of us have been trying to tell larger companies and even some smaller companies to really start thinking about the customer engagement aspect of this. And it, you know, not necessarily being a channel that can just sell stuff, but a content delivery and an information delivery channel. I think Brian Romley said something like that at Project Voice that really stuck with me, that we need to stop looking at Alexa and Google Assistant and Bixby as like these standalone things. They're just content delivery channels. They're a means at which we deliver information. We're just doing it more intelligently. So I think, again, you both shared some really good thoughts there on something that people can start thinking about today or put into practice with these voice assistants. Well, Shaun, Levi, this has been a really good discussion. I really learned a lot more about jargon and just content in general, which is something I think a lot of us in the voice space definitely could always use some brushing up on and be up to date on, especially for some of us developers who just get so into the weeds of what we're doing, forget the content aspect. But if anybody wanted to reach out to either of you or learn more about jargon, what are some ways they can go about doing so?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having us on, Nick. It was really fun. And you know, if you're interested in learning more about jargon, please go to www.jargon.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much again for taking the time to chat with me here and sharing your really solid knowledge on content. I really hope that people will get some takeaways from this. So thank you guys so much, and we'll chat soon.
Awesome.
Thanks, Nick. We appreciate it.
Artificial
Intelligence.
voice recognition, machine learning.
Robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers. To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.